Welcome to Yesterday, Today, Tomorrow. My name is Mariana Cordier, and I am your host. Today we are discussing the importance and impact philanthropy and activism has on our democracy. Philanthropy enables communities to solve problems, and activism consists of efforts to promote, impede, direct, or intervene in social, political, and economic issues with a desire to make changes in society. To discuss the importance of philanthropy and activism, I am joined by Rosie Allen-Herring, President and CEO of United Way, Dr. Stephen Thomas, Director of Maryland Center for Health Equity, School of Public Health at University of Maryland, and Saman Qadeer-Ahmad, attorney and activist. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So, philanthropy, what does the United Way see as the current issues surrounding creating an atmosphere for people to want to be active in philanthropy?
Well, I think, again, when it comes to philanthropy, it's really just the opportunity that we all have to care for our community collectively. Because I think a lot of times people assume that philanthropy means you're some wealthy benefactor, when philanthropy is something that everyone can do because everyone can do something. And so for us in this region, I think you find that there's a lot of largesse, but also there's a lot of need. And philanthropy is really the opportunity to be able to fill a gap with that need.
And we're familiar with the big organizations that help us when there's, a disaster, or when there's, I think earlier when we were talking in the green room, you were saying everyone has the right to have a place to live
Absolutely.
and sleep, to eat, to have access to health care. So, philanthropy in my mind is somewhat filling the gaps.
It is.
Right.
Absolutely. I mean, when you think about what are the basic needs, and when we think about what the sense of urgency is around our community and some of the toughest challenges that are facing our community, it's really some basic needs, if you will. Everything from, is there a financially stable household that can thrive, and what's happening to actualize that? Is it workforce? Is it having access to a job that's a living wage in today's society? And for us in this region, because it's pretty much considered a high cost region, what does that mean? It's looking at education. Do our children have access to the best education and all of the tools that are there? How do we make certain that that's there for every child and not just certain jurisdictions? And when we look at health, although this region is considered one of the healthiest regions in the country, it also has some of the largest and some of the highest chronic disease rates as well in the country. So for us at Your United Way, it's really about looking at the gap, recognizing that as a community we have quite a bit of largesse, and there is generosity that is here. And our job is to connect, bringing the community to those resources and those resources to the community.
Dr. Thomas, you know about health and equity. What would you say about the importance of the role of philanthropy and activism?
Well, when was the last time you went to the library?
Too
And
long.
if you've been to the library, you realize that you're touching philanthropy. The first libraries in the United States were set in motion by Andrew Carnegie.
Yeah.
And it was all about what it means to be an educated citizen in a democracy. Okay? And so we ask people to step up. If you have bootstraps, pull them up. We're a country of independent individualism, but you have to have an educated populace. So back in the late 1800s, he started this. And by 1929, there were 1,500 libraries across the United States. And one of the things he did? He said that I will put up money for your library, but you have to provide the land. You have to provide the payment for the staff. And it cannot be private money. The staff and the running of the library should come from the public. In other words, taxes of the public. Why? So that everybody's invested in a library.
And access, to make sure everyone has access.
Absolutely.
And for people for many African Americans who can trace their ancestry back to the time of slavery,
Yes.
it was against the law to read. You could be killed if you were seen teaching a slave to read.
Right.
So that is our path to freedom. I think it is still our path to freedom today. There's a lot of misinformation out there. People don't know where the facts are coming from. And I hope that our public libraries are places where people can go for accurate information for a whole range of topics, from climate change.
That's an awesome segue into what I wanted to talk about, of activism, of becoming a person that is active in the community and to promote their issues and their concerns in our society, because that's what makes us great, and being able to do reforms, deal with what is current and necessary now. Things change with time. What do you think, Saman? Do you see?
Well, I've had this view that there really is no philanthropy without activism, because philanthropy, it's like Rosie said, it's there to provide certain basic needs and stuff like that of our community, education, whatever the issues are. But as a philanthropist, you have to understand the issues of the community that you're trying to impact. And if you're a philanthropic organization like United, they have a lot of clout because they've actually been on the ground understanding what are the issues that their communities or the people they serve are suffering from. At that point, you also have to look at what is going on in the system. How can we impact change on a systemic, holistic level and then translate it back? Because at some point, you want to move people from instability into greater financial stability, no housing into affordable housing. So it's a segue, and therefore there's a public-private partnership almost that it's kind of inherent that exists. And that's where individuals, activists really play a role, because they're kind of a nexus. They're not in government, they're not in philanthropy exactly, or they're not of that means that they can do that, but at the same time, they're able to be capacity builders.
Right. And I think one of the other issues is that you bring to attention to the community when something is happening that may not be in the best interest of the community. I mean, I know that you were mentioning to me earlier about the Creagan Commission. There's the idea of funding a portion of it with a service tax.
Absolutely. And
why don't you tell us a little bit more? What does that mean, the service tax?
So right now there's sales tax in the state of Maryland, which is 6%, and there is no tax on services, which is pretty common across the United States except for a few states. But what happens here is that the Creagan Initiative, or the Creagan Commission, I'm sorry, I agree, education is definitely a top priority in the state because we have to level it, there needs to be equity. But the problem becomes is that you cannot just simply increase sales tax to increase revenue to then be moved to, you have to look at what is the impact that's going to happen on the business community that you are trying to impact that tax on. Will they be able to survive that? Will they be competitive because of the interstate commerce that happens? I mean, Maryland technically is a very small state. It doesn't take very long to get to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Virginia. And with the advent of technology, why is it that businesses would come to Maryland to do business with us if we're 6% more expensive?
Right.
And
I was thinking, what about the tax or the monies raised from the gaming community and the slots and the casinos? I thought that was supposed to fund it, and then monies get transferred to the general fund. And I think that makes the work all that much harder for all of us.
So we have to just be careful in the fact that, the gaming industry brings in $1.9 billion in revenue, which is a significant amount of money.
That's billion, not million.
Did I say billion? I apologize.
No, you said billion, but it's a big number.
Yeah, it's billion. And this service tax will bring in approximately, they're estimating 2.6 billion. That doesn't account for people that potentially could leave Maryland into Virginia because we're at the Montgomery County line. But, why did that 1.9 billion not go towards education?
Right.
Some of the things that are in the Creagan Commission are very similar. I'm not advocating against the Creagan Commission. All I'm saying is what happened, what did history teach us? We have to be extremely careful at how we deal with our economic advantage as well, because Maryland, that is a big concern for legislators in Maryland. How are we going to stay economically?
And I think it would also affect the philanthropic work as well, no?
Absolutely. When you look at the tax structure, and public policy is a lot that we look at, in the course of our work in philanthropy, it's how the current tax policies from the current administration federally impacts philanthropy because of now the doubling of the standard deduction. And most people don't realize what that's done is taken away the average individual's ability to be able to contribute towards their community.
Right.
You know, again, when you think about philanthropy, it's not the wealthy benefactor, it's something that we all can do. And when we were looking at the itemization, which really sparked some of the philanthropy, it was everyone could donate clothes to Goodwill. Everyone may have given something to their house of worship. Everyone may have given something to an organization that fueled a personal passion of theirs, maybe driven by family or some other, you know, incident. But when you now double the standard deduction, you're not necessarily required to do that for the average, earner. But now, by taking that away, you're not even thinking about it because it's something that's supposed to be helpful and that you don't have to think about it. We'll just double it in order to be able to help our middle class families. But what it does for those organizations that were on the receiving ends of those funds, not having someone think of them can truly impact their numbers and the ability to be able to serve those families. Absolutely.
Right, and it just widens the gap. Instead of closing gaps, we seem to be widening them.
And the thing is that even with corporations, I've worked for major corporations like Coca-Cola. They do have a huge philanthropic wing, and that's on a national, worldwide level, but there are so many corporations, even within the state of Maryland, that have very strong philanthropic presences and relationships because they're tied, they came from these communities. But they first have to look at their bottom line as well. How are they going to be impacted? And, you know, it depends on how difficult or how expensive your market is already to operate in. So it's a fine balance, and we have to be careful and very thoughtful at how we navigate through that.
You know, we as Americans, we think we're special. And you know what? We actually are. Philanthropy is unique. It is not common in other countries. The philanthropy that we're talking about here is really uniquely American, that we care about others. And I've been struggling with the fact that we're going to have to talk to some very, very wealthy people and try to shape how they give. And so if you go on to any campus of a historically black university, Howard University, you name them, you'll find buildings with names like Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald, money came from Sears and Roebuck, but he has a tremendous story of his core values of giving back. So philanthropy can be used in a lot of different ways. It can be used to divide us. We should not assume that everyone who's a philanthropist is giving in the direction that your core values are. So let's put the values on the table.
Sure.
And the question is, are the new capitalists, the new billionaires and multimillionaires, what core values do they have? Are they building new libraries? Are they building universities? What are they doing? And who's holding them accountable to that?
So, Stephen, you brought up a really good point about, you know, whose moral code and donations and philanthropy, which direction it's going in.
Well, we're living in a time of great polarization. And if I want to meet some capitalists, that means I want to meet some folks with resources and see if I can help shape where they invest those resources. For example, if you go to any historically black college and university in the United States, Howard University, many of the others around the country, you'll see buildings with the name Julius Rosenwald. And they made their money through Sears and Roebuck. But his history, his story as a Jewish man who benefited from the American dream and was committed to giving back. That's not universal.
No.
We should ask the question, what are the core values that come with those resources? We've seen institutions like Harvard or MIT get in trouble because they got philanthropic money that was tainted or dirty or associated with a person that now we don't want to be associated with. So values are important.
How does United Way deal with the values issue?
Well, we always want to make certain that any of the donations that we have come from individuals who share the philosophy that we have. That's why we're very clear about the areas of focus for us. It's going to be one of three areas. It's going to be working in education, financial stability, or health-related issues.
But what about people who want to donate money, but they are tainted for whatever reason? Can't we redeem them? Is there a way of,
Like, would you take money from the tobacco industry?
No, we would not. And we wouldn't take, funds from someone who couldn't pass, the Patriot Act in terms of, again, looking at anti-terrorism measures for us as a country from a foreign entity as well. So when you look at philanthropy, it's not just those who are necessarily aligned with you, but you certainly wouldn't be looking to entertain anyone who is totally disassociated with the philosophy that you have in terms of who you're trying to support. And so when we think about those three areas that we've talked about for us, health, education, and financial stability, we look at all of our donors. We ask them all to make certain that they are understanding how the funds are being used, because for us also, we can't have those funds directed in a particular direction. Certainly, they have to trust that we understand the capacity of the community, that we know who's credible, who has the capacity to be able to serve, and know that those funds are being used for the purpose intended, that we're being good stewards of those resources as well. So it's a large conversation that has to be had, but because we recognize, to your point, Dr. Thomas, that we are in a very polarized society as a norm right now, and I find it to be a little troubling that it is normal.
And we're in a society at the moment that I think this polarization's ripple effect is for many years, if not decades, to come. And so as leaders in the community, what is something that you would say to the audience to see if there's a way of redirecting or, steering the ship in a better direction?
I mean, I think for your audience, and most of your audience are pretty, well-read individuals who really deeply care, and that's why they're watching this show. I would say to be the actual citizens that they're expected to be, meaning that they need to understand the public policy issues that are impacting our society, understand how things are interwoven and how they actually work. If we understand where the dollars go and what that flow looks like, and who's making the decisions about what gets funded, everything from public dollars to how our private dollars are being taken and used, and what's that accountability looks like. When we have the accountability conversation, what we try to have at Your United Way literally every day, it's really about, at the end of the day, whose life has been touched and made different because we exist. What ill are we trying to solve for, and how do we know when we've gotten there? What are the milestones that we need to take, and who else should we be working with in order to be able to make that happen? Because no one entity, just like no one benefactor, can solve any particular ill. It will always have to be in cooperation with someone or something else.
And Saman, what would be something that you would say to young adults and the millennials and the rest about becoming active, being heard, having a participation in the process? About, you mentioned this one bill that's affecting the monies for the Creagan Commission, but I'm sure there are a ton of other bills out there that affect everybody of all ages, and it needs and requires participation in the process.
One of the things that sometimes it's not very common that you see a young Muslim woman being so active in local politics. And oftentimes they're surprised by, how do you know so much about the system? And I get, well, you're political, so you would know these. And I'm like, no, I am political because I care. And it's not because I care for my own community, but the thing is, we all actually have shared narratives, and there's an intersection on all of our stories. It could be the Irish community, the Catholic, the Jewish, African, whateve it is. They've all had some sort of commonalities in trying to adjust to a new society, or a different society than what they originally come from. And so it's like, when you learn to care, you also learn to try, if you can't walk in someone else's shoes, try walking with them for a day. And that really opens your eyes, especially amongst youth. When you really care about even in schools, there's bullying, and kids are really screaming, like, how do we handle bullying? You walk in the shoes of the kids that are being bullied, for whatever reason it is. And it changes you for even a day when it's actually targeted towards you, even though you wouldn't be subject to it otherwise. And at that point, get organized. We live in a thriving society in Montgomery County. It's an ecosystem of so many different coalitions. If you take the time to get involved, maybe through the political process, the nonprofits, there are so many collaborations to be had, and people will be there to help you along the way because someone will understand your narrative.
And I loved what you said earlier. It was so impactful, Dr. Thomas, about the education that you can give yourself by going to a library and being well read and researching a topic that really interests you. These days, you don't even have to go to the library. You can go to the virtual libraries that are online and accessible and free, or you can actually go to the library and become informed about something that's important to you.
Well, we have to realize that we take these things for granted. That there are societies where if you do not grow up with books, you'll never have books.
Right.
So somebody had to have the idea that having books available to the public, free of charge, was what we needed to have a thriving democracy. And that's what's at threat right now with misinformation, fake news. The libraries have to be a refuge. They have to be a beacon of hope. And what's impressive to me is to see new libraries being constructed right here in Montgomery County and Prince George's County, actually across the region.
Yes.
Something good is happening. And it seems to me that that's part of the public good. And so in that context, what are the new millionaires and billionaires doing with their resources? And at the same time, you can be an everyday person. You don't have to be a millionaire to be a philanthropist. Absolutely. Just instill the value of giving back.
You know, one of my old boss said to me on my last day, and it was a conversation, but you know, I feel very privileged living in this society where I have so much. And he's like, no, I think you missed it. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, privilege is not what you have. It's the ability to impact change. You have that capacity, and when you know that, that is when you are privileged. And I think that that's always carried forward for me is that something happened, I perhaps don't need to speak up. But the thing is, somewhere, someone, some woman, some child, they might be too afraid to speak up. And so you have to have a voice sometimes greater than for yourself, but for others.
Absolutely.
And that's the human interaction that you cannot get actually on a computer. You might only get it in the library.
Right.
You have to be willing to reach out and engage someone that not like yourself. Mm-hmm. And that starts very early. Yes. So whatever's happening with the results of the Kerwin Commission, the bottom line is we need good education.
Absolutely.
But that education should also instill some core values that contribute to the greater good, something bigger than yourself.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't think education should be just limited to topics and mathematics and social studies and history, although they're very important. And history has a habit of repeating itself. But I think what's really important is that the becoming knowledgeable and figuring out a way to be able to then apply that knowledge to what matters to you is super important. And it's even more amazing when it's the young people doing it, like when the gun lobby being faced with these kids from high school and such. So I have a lot of hope for the future, and I really appreciate all of you helping us get this show about philanthropy and activism out to the audience. We can be seen on YTT on the YouTube channel, YTT, and please check us out on Facebook and Instagram. I would like to thank my guests for joining me and the audience for watching tonight. I invite all of you to join me next week at the same time. I'm Mariana Cordier. Good night.